Hi, I'm Stephen.
And I'm Celine from the Cult Hackers podcast.
So I'm a former member of a high control group, otherwise known as a cult, who left when I was about 30. That's about the time my daughter was born. That's you, Celine.
We explore what it's like to be in a cult and leave one. We interview former members and leading cult experts. And we also talk about the long journey of making sense of the world afterwards.
Yeah, that's a journey that you've witnessed and helped me with.
I'm a media graduate interested in the place cults have in our society.
And I'm an organisational psychologist these days with an interest in leadership and who also studies cults and cultic groups.
There's a new episode every week where we look at cults from every angle and attempt to crack the cult code.
So search for Cult Hackers on your favourite podcast app and catch up with us every Saturday.
Hello listeners, and welcome to part 2 in this mini-series on Xenos Christian Fellowship. In part 1, Emma talked us through her early involvement in the group, and in part 2 we will discuss Emma's furthering involvement in Xenos before her eventual escape. For early access to ad-free full-length episodes, you can support the show at patreon.com/thecultvault. But for now, here is Emma. When you mentioned that the church felt like they were above certain things, or that certain things couldn't happen to them, was there ever a time where a leadership's child fell ill and they had to explain around kind of contradicting themselves on their messages?
I'm sure. I mean, I don't think that they ever attributed things like that to the punishment of God necessarily. But really it's just that their actions go unchecked. Their character, the way that they treat people goes unchecked. And there have been situations where that's been really bad. I mean, this hasn't been talked about in the media that I know of, but one of the main leaders at one point was cheating on his wife with several young girls that were her disciplers in his own home church. He was, pursuing them sexually, and some of them were consenting. I think some of them weren't. I think some of them were groomed and manipulated. I don't know the entire story, but again, that wasn't addressed legally. They just turned on that leader and said, you have to get out of here, basically. And they haven't taken ownership for that either. That was just a him problem. That wasn't a leadership problem. But I mean, it's the direct effect of them shaming other people, but never taking responsibility for anything themselves. When it goes unchecked for so long, you can get away with anything.
Perhaps that would also encourage predators to step into or remain in that environment if they realize that there really isn't any consequence or repercussion for them carrying out their horrific actions within that type of church setting.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how much sexual abuse is going on. I know of a few instances, but when it comes to emotional, psychological, spiritual abuse, everybody that I've talked to that has left has experienced that firsthand for many years, actually. So I think, it definitely does allow opportunity for predators, whether that's sexually or other forms of abuse.
So once you moved into the communal home, do you remember that day? Do you remember packing your bags and actually walking out of your home?
Kind of. I was already kind of living there for the summer before that. I was just spending all my time there, and I didn't want to be around my parents because we were in conflict about me going. And so I was kind of already moved in. I don't know if I remember the exact day.
Did you already know which room you'd be in, how many people you might be sharing that room with, who these people were?
Yes. My first ministry house, the answer is yes. But following that, I mean, it's not uncommon to move once or twice a year when you're living in a ministry house. And I think the most amount of people I lived with was 14 girls with one bathroom, one kitchen. And the ministry houses aren't owned by Xenos, but they are run by them. They're led by them. So when they say, lie to your landlord about how many people are living there, we say, okay. If they say, you guys have to move in the next month, find a place, we say, okay. If they say, we're going to move in another 4 people to your house in a week, we say, okay. So I knew the people I was moving in with initially, but that was uncommon for being in a ministry house. So oftentimes you didn't know where you were going to live, who you were going to live with. There were, 3-4 people in a room. There was no privacy at all, and really no control of your life.
You're 16 at this point. Some people would say that that's really still a child. You're definitely a young adult at this point. Was there anything in place to protect you from potential abusers that you found yourself living with?
No. I mean, no, but yes. I mean, the whole system of Xenos is based on reporting to other people. So everybody knows what's going on with everybody at all times. Even if you're not in the same group, you know the dirt on other people. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question. It's like we were surveilled, but there wasn't necessarily anything put in place legally or like in writing to protect me. It was just, there was a contract, actually, it was called a covenant for the communal living house that it was basically like language where you agreed to being a perfect spiritual Christian person, and if you didn't abide by that, they could kick you out at any time.
So when you were moved from one house to another, were your parents made aware of this? Did you let them know, or would you mention it to them at one of these regular services that you were all expected to attend, or was it a real breakdown of communication at that point?
I mean, I would tell them, but like sometimes we would only know 2 weeks beforehand. So they were just kind of like, all right, at that point. My sister, I think there was 1 year that she moved 4 times. So there's an area that we were all kind of concentrated in, but it was just kind of another thing for my parents, just as if I were to tell them, like, I went to a different coffee shop the other day, like I'm moving again.
The decision behind the communal homes was all based on discipling and going to recruit more members of the church.
I think it's based on like just living your life with other people that are in the congregation. So it's a lot about accountability. It's a lot about like, I mean, one of the messages that I heard a lot is that if you wanted time to yourself, that was selfish. Being autonomous was a very negative thing. You never wanted to be viewed as being like too independent, because it was communicated to us that was against God's design for us. Yeah, even if it was just living in a different place. So I think the initial purpose was just to have accountability and community in a very extreme way. But yeah, also like having a house full of 10 women who are love bombing a stranger makes them, wonder, like, how are these people so nice? Why are they so good to me? They just hang out all the time in this party house, and maybe I should go out to their meeting because they're so nice. But then it's a different story once they actually join.
You mentioned that it was also around this time that you were taking on leadership training as well. Do you remember what age you were when you completed that training, what the training looked like, and how you then went into action as a leader?
So I started leading in the high school group before I even started the leadership training classes. And then I quickly became a house leader in the college group when I was 17. So before I could even like tell a landlord that I wanted to sign the lease, because I mean, most people weren't on the lease anyway, because we were all lying. But yeah, I was a leader of the house when I was 17 too. And I don't think I was in leadership training classes then either. But it was for the college group, it was every Wednesday night, and it was a privilege, and it was around 3 hours, I think, of talking through different concepts about the Bible and how they applied to Xenos. And there were some interesting exercises. We would do church visits and basically just critique the churches and talk about how they were so much shittier than us and we were better than everyone else. And but then there was like a morality exercise or like an ethics exercise almost, where the teacher would say some sinful behavior and then every member of the class would have to rate it out of 5 about like how sinful it was. And it was such bullshit. Like people would be like getting drunk and they'd be like 5, it's so fucked up, 5, and then they'd be like pride. Oh, it's like a 2. But it's like really the pride is ruining people's lives and getting drunk is not very consequential. So yeah, the classes lasted it was like there were 6 levels. Like you could go through leadership training class 1 through 6, but 6 was only for people who are sitting in on leaders meetings already. So if each of those is like a semester, then I don't know how many years that is, or maybe it was a quarter. I don't remember, but yeah. Yeah, and I went through everything before I left. Even LTC 6. Yeah, I don't know. I still have the material here somewhere. I haven't looked through it in a while, but there were classes that I took too that went over how being gay is a sin. And
I was going to ask actually about the LGBTQIA plus community, because you mentioned pride, and then you said that pride is killing people. And then it took me a second to realize that you mean the sin of pride and not the pride as in going out to celebrate the LGBT community. For a second I was like, why would she say that? And then I was like, oh, I realized the sin of pride, sorry. So what would the church look like for somebody that identified as a member of the LGBT community?
Mm-hmm. So one of my best friends is gay and she left the church. She was actually my disciple's disciple. So I was like her
Grandchild.
disciple.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we are like best friends now, and she is she's living with her girlfriend and they're so in love and I really love her. And but her experience was terrible, obviously. Going into Dwell, she knew that people didn't accept gay people. The thing is that, we would say like, oh, God loves everybody. God loves everyone. He doesn't, everything's a sin. Everyone's sinful. Like, it's not just being gay. But then when you got in it, it was like totally unacceptable. If you wanted to move into the ministry house, or if you wanted to go to cell group, or if you wanted to take a leadership training class, you could not be gay. Absolutely not. And they viewed it as a choice. They wouldn't call it being gay. They called it same-sex attraction. And so everybody has attractions, but it's what, like, how you act on it is what they said. But my friend, I mean, she wouldn't mind me telling her story, but she told people that she was attracted to women, but she was like, it's not a big deal, like that's not who I am. Just kind of whatever. She even tried to date men at one point, and I tried to set her up with somebody. But she ended up being outed to everyone. I mean, like I said, everybody knew everything about everyone, and so she was outed. And the way that she was outed too was like this really gross perspective of gay people, which I think that the church has in general, which basically her disciple told everybody, all the women, before a retreat that we went on, to be careful around her because she was gay. So we should be careful, like changing around her or being in, bathing suits or things like that because she's gay. And so just a very like shaming message that, essentially because she's attracted to the same sex, she's dangerous to be around, which is so gross. So
Yeah.
gross. Oh my gosh. But she left after having a surprise intervention about her sexual orientation, where they were like, if you love God, then why are you gay, essentially. And she left after that.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah. And I mean, Sins has just grown so much. Like, she's so strong. She's so courageous. She knows who she is now and she loves herself for it. And like, has just this really beautiful life. Like, she's constantly telling me that she's never been happier. So happy ending, but that's how gay people are treated in the church.
Well, I'm happy to hear that that person is thriving outside of a repressive, homophobic, transphobic environment. And to
Yeah.
any people that are existing within this church that identify as queer, as gay, as trans, as pansexual or gender fluid, I hope that every person gets the opportunity to live authentically to their orientation, whatever that may be, outside of this church environment. Unless the church really wants to take a look at itself and realize that if you're going to have 12 women living in a house together, there's a chance that some of them might end up in relationships with each other, or some of them might be attracted to each other, because that's just how the world works. So you mentioned that sleep was really not something that was encouraged in the group. Actually, it felt almost like Xenos didn't want you to get much sleep. And that's definitely how it sounds after all of the activities and obligations you've listed.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any other things that you feel you were restricted in? I mean, leisure time, I'm sure there's not much time for. You mentioned free time, and I was thinking, well, what would free time?
Right. Right.
You know, oh, you get to move up in the church, and when you move up in the church, you get more free time. And I was thinking, well, I feel like that's kind of like a dangling carrot that doesn't come to
Right.
fruition.
Right.
And then also just wondering about things like your diet, your clothing. Were you restricted in any way with any of those things? I've written here relationships, but I think it's obvious that it goes without saying that that too was not encouraged.
Yeah. I like, just to clarify, I wouldn't say you get more free time as you it, what's the word? As you progress in Xenos, but you get more freedom. So like less people breathing down your neck, less
Right.
people checking in on you.
Right. That
But
thing, I
you're
think that might have been the word you used, and I've misinterpreted it as free time, whereas actually it's just less surveillance.
right, right. Yeah, but sleep was a big thing. I mean, we would be outright like shamed publicly and if we said we wanted to get a full 8 hours of sleep. They said it was selfish and kind of taking away time that the Lord could use you. But yeah, I think like dress was a thing for, like a little bit, where we were told, like women were told at certain times that like clothing, like leggings or something, were like stumbling to the men, that we would like stop wearing them at certain times. argued with one of my leaders for over an hour after she confronted me about the provocative, quote unquote, way that I was sitting, which I was essentially just like manspreading, like just not sitting with my legs together. And she told me how that was inappropriate and inconsiderate of me. And I just argued with her like for over an hour about how ridiculous that was. There was even a girl that we policed, like one specific member of our home church. We policed her so strictly that we like had a code to signal to her, a code word that when she seemed like too sexy in front of people, even if we like couldn't explain how, we would just basically be like, stop doing that, stop standing that way. So that was part of it. But really the biggest way that we were restricted was with decision making. And this could be like a whole separate episode's worth of content, honestly, but the shame and morality that dwell tied to decision making has been one of the most difficult things for me to unlearn. We were expected to run our decisions, both large and small decisions, past a slew of people before taking action on anything. And if we didn't do that, or if we disagreed with the quote unquote wise counsel that we received from people about our decision, then you were accused of being unwilling to seek counsel or unwilling to listen to wise counsel. You were called prideful and selfish and autonomous. And that was probably one of those were the biggest labels that I got in Xenos, because if you can't already tell, I was willing to stand up to the leaders and tell them, I think that this is weird, or I don't agree with this, or, I would still bring them my decisions because that's just how things worked. But sometimes I just wouldn't agree with the counsel that they would give me. And so I got called all those names all the time, especially towards the end.
I feel like somebody picking up on the way that you're sitting is perhaps the observer's issue and not yours.
Right. Maybe she was attracted to me.
I mean, but who knows? Maybe. I feel like a lot of people in these positions of power where they exert certain things over people is merely a reflection of their true desires or their true wants in life, but maybe that's just an observation on my part. And what would happen if you were to go against any of these things? You've mentioned there that there were times where you would stand up to leadership, where you would question things, where you would disagree with things. What would happen if you were continuously not attending services, or not coming to live in the house, or moving out of the communal house, or not taking off those leggings?
Yeah. Well, I think that there would be different levels of consequences for each of those things, which we can definitely talk about. But I think generally the biggest mode of control was shame. So either privately or publicly, you would be shamed for going against the status quo. I mean, I personally have been part of many like surprise interventions as well as group confessions, but that they were that were coerced. And the goal was to confront somebody about how sinful they were for not doing it the Xenos way. Which, I mean, it's as inconsequential as like accidentally having too much to drink, and you would find yourself in a coerced group confession or a surprise intervention about it. I mean, we can definitely talk about this as we continue the the podcast, but I personally, one of the big reasons I left is because I said I didn't want to live in the ministry house anymore. And I can tell you firsthand the consequences of that. But really, I mean, yeah, it could be as small as being shamed privately, but as big as literally losing everything in your life. I had a friend who went against something that Dwell considered inappropriate, or he did something that Dwell seemed considered inappropriate, and they convinced his girlfriend to break up with him when he was about to propose. They kicked him out of the ministry house without notice. He ended up losing his job, which was at Dwell. And then he was asked to leave the home church and go to an adult group. And when he was asked to go to a different group, he was like, no, I don't want to do that. He was like, my entire life just got turned upside down. Like, I lost my fiance, I lost my job, I lost my house. Like, I don't want to go to a different group of people that don't know me at all, that I have no history with. And then he just got an email the next week from a member of the adult group saying, hey, we heard you wanted to check out groups. So he's still there now. He's in an adult group. But I just explained that to drive the point home that you could lose your entire life. You could lose everything.
Just by not going with what leadership tell you to go with. Wow,
Right.
that's heartbreaking. That's really upsetting to hear that. And his partner was in the church, and she was encouraged by the church to, wow.
And in his case, he knew that what he was doing would ruin his life, so he tried to hide it, which I can't imagine how much strain that put on him emotionally too. And then his worst nightmare came true, and he lost everything.
Oh, that's so sad. And he's still there,
as far as I know. Yeah.
So you mentioned that there were a few things that started happening towards the lead up to your departure from the church. Was there one specific event where you just said, okay, no, that's it. I can't do this anymore?
No. It's funny talking to people about how they left, because a lot of people, there was one thing, or it was this thing over time where they were realizing that this is what's being taught there, what's being done there is wrong. But for me, when I look back on it, it was more so just a trauma response than a well thought out decision or a reaction to something in specifically. I think that there were a couple things that really solidified in my mind, like, I can't be here. But then it was just a flip of a switch where I was like, I have to leave right now. Yeah, I mean, one of those things was the way that they handled COVID and the shutdown. It was very black and white, a moral issue, very controlling of what people's opinions should be and how they should act. I took issue with that. But then I also went on a trip with my friend and kissed a stranger, which was totally, like, it's hard to describe like how wrong that is in Xenos's eyes. But that kind of like brought me to just like walking on eggshells with people. I was ready. It was like when I turned the corner, there was going to be another person that was there to admonish me and tell me how wrong it was that I kissed somebody. I mean, I was being confronted like morning, noon, and night. Like, my roommates would wake me up and tell me like how wrong I was for doing that. But then I also just realized, like, I'm an adult now, and I've been living in a ministry house for 10 years at this point. I was 26. And I was like, this is just weird. This is so weird. I don't have a room to myself. I have all these roommates. This house is disgusting. It's filthy. Like, I was just, you know, I felt crowded, like all the things. And I didn't want to bring any of my friends there. And I was like, I don't want to live here anymore. And by expressing that, that's when people really snapped, I think. Like, it was just like all of my friends, even my close friends, like just started panicking and making it about themselves, and weren't willing to listen to me at all or have my best interests at heart. And I just realized, like, I am being controlled, and this is torture, being admonished all the time for wanting normal things. I think that the shutdown too was actually really helpful, because I was unemployed for a certain amount of time, and it actually gave me time to like slow down and think. I mean, I was living with 10 women in a house with like 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and before people would wake up, I would work out and then leave the house for like a 3 to 4 hour long walk just to get out of that crowded house and breathe. And I think that honestly helped me evaluate like how I was being treated. But yeah, when I left, I didn't initially call it a cult, because it's all I knew my entire life. But the only way I could describe what I was going through to people was by saying it feels like I left a cult.
You've got the 2 layers working in conjunction with one another as well. You've got the overarching church itself and the congregation that you would visit, as a child growing up with your parents. You've also got the kind of self-sealing communal environment with the 24-hour surveillance, the little amount of sleep, the constant breathing down your neck and telling you how you should do things to the letter, to the point where it's taken you a couple of years to unlearn that need for leadership to tell you what the right thing to do is, or how you should do things, or what time you should do things, which is pretty significant, because you've got, when you've got those 2 things working together, apart from a job that outside of that church, there's really nothing else that can take you out of that. And when you finally decided to leave the communal home, did you leave the church in conjunction, or were you still going to some of the meetups and services? Because there's that other layer to consider.
When I left, my intention was to go to an adult group, because it was just very obvious that I was not welcome in the college group anymore, for wanting these normal things. But then I visited a few of the adult groups, and that's when it started to settle in that, okay, this is not just in the group that I experienced. This is not just situational. There's been some real serious damage and abuse that's happened that I need to heal from. And so I didn't, like I said, the decision to leave was more of a panicked trauma response. I didn't think through it. I didn't think through the fact that I would be in conflict with my friends or anything. And so I convinced myself, oh, I'll just get my own place. I'll go to a different group. But then as I started going to those groups, I was like, this is way deeper than I actually think it is. And all of the consequences that I didn't think through about distancing myself from that environment started to pop up. And I stopped going to church and went to therapy instead.
So going to these other meetups and these other settings, you're realizing that the feelings that you had in the communal home are just following you to every dwell environment, no matter where it is or who it's with.
Right. And I think that, in dwell, the popular opinion is that the college group is where the thrust of the abuse occurs. That's even acknowledged within the organization itself. They wouldn't call it abuse though, but it's definitely where the leadership has the most control over its members, because not only are they in communal living houses, which are run by the leaders, but they're also just going to so many events that there's like no time where they're not being controlled or watched. And so when I went to an adult group, I kind of thought that I wouldn't run into the same issues, but I did. And it was also just too triggering for me. That there are many people in Dwell who are in the adult group who think that the abuse, that they don't perpetuate the abuse, that they don't agree with what's going on in the college group, but they're separate from that because they're not in the college group. But I think that that's actually like a very problematic perspective, because you're still part of the problem. You're still supporting the people who are perpetuating the problem. And so therefore, I think that you are perpetuating it as well. Like by believing that this is the only place that you can be, that no other, like that the abuse others have suffered is not as valuable as you being in like the best church of all time. Like that's a really selfish perspective, and a really like, I don't know what the word is, but I'm just like, you want to follow God, then go somewhere else where like hundreds of people aren't reporting abuse. Just because you're in a different branch of that doesn't mean that you're not part of the problem. Like you're still essentially worshiping these leaders and giving them the okay stamp that what's going on in the church is totally fine to cover up and pretend like it's not happening.
Even though you left the communal home or the college group, and said to friends and family, "Oh, I'm sticking around. I'm just going to go to some different things." What was that inner conflict like for you when you realized that you were going to have to tell your friends and family, "Oh, actually, no, I have to just get out." Like a trauma response, as you said there, is often what people have explained on the show as being life or death. Their body is telling them, you've pushed all this stuff down for so long that your body is then telling you, if you don't get out of this situation, you are not going to exist much longer. And that's a very real thing.
And I think that's a good way to put it too. I mean, I've read since I left about the kind of psychological, physical, emotional effects of the type of abuse that I suffered. And it's like, it's textbook. I mean, basically, to answer your question, as I told people, I had more faith in them than I should have. I mean, people, even some of my closest friends told me that it wasn't abuse or that it wasn't trauma that I experienced. Which is why I kind of did some of that research to be like, no, I was right. You're actually just gaslighting me. But yeah, like my friends and even my parents became panicked, unreasonable, defensive. At first my parents were accepting and like listened to me, but then they basically told me to get over it and stop talking about it. Which is just par for the course in that community. It's like, you just pretend like everything's fine, everyone's harmonious, like you don't dwell on the past, you just move on. And I don't want to do that. Like this is such a, now as I'm living my life 2 years later, it's only been 2 years later, but I've grown so much, I've learned so much. I want to share my story. I want to help people. It's not something that I think defines who I am, but it's something that I am able to talk about as part of who I am, part of my story. But yeah, people were largely very unsupportive, and I had to consider for the first time what friendship is, what friendship means, what boundaries mean. how to practice them, and have kind of curated a wonderful, compassionate group of friends who are my family. And that was hard to do because I had to cut some people out, at least for now. But the people that I have supporting me now are like more than I could ever ask for.
These are people outside of Dwell?
Yes. Some of them left before I did, and we've reconnected, which is really wonderful because we can process together. But others are old coworkers or old friends that I reconnected with since I left.
How do people outside of Dwell take it when you open up to them about these experiences that you've had?
The funny thing is that most people that I've shared this with already know, because like I said, Dwell is very widely known for being a cult in Columbus. So if I mention I was in a really high control environment, or I was in a cult, or I went to Xenos, people immediately know. They already know. And they're typically pretty interested, I would say, for the most part, about what my experience was, which is nice. And I think that they can tell that I'm like a pretty normal person now, so they're not like scared of me or anything. But yeah, I've had a lot of people who have been willing to kind of get informed for me, which is really, really cool.
So now at this point, you've detached yourself from the movement and found your own place. What was it like living in a quieter environment? Because I bet that was something that took some getting used to as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. The first couple months I would be sitting in my own apartment and be like, something's wrong, what's going on? And then I was like, oh, it's just quiet. I just have privacy for the first time. I've never known what that's like. So yeah, it was strange, but in a good way. I mean, I got my first adult sized bed as a 26-year-old, and loved decorating my apartment and having people over. And but yeah, the privacy and the freedom was so weird getting used to, especially the freedom part. Like it's taken me a really long time to not feel guilty when I'm resting, or feel like I should be doing something else, or it's wrong of me to just, relax. But I mean, it's been really great too. I'm grateful every single day. Like I love my apartment so much. Been like trying to, I've been figuring out who I really am, learning how to trust myself and honor my intuition, and like I said before, like try to figure out what it looks like to have real friendships, which my friends have been incredibly patient with me in that area, because I've definitely had a lot of trial and error. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd say like my community has been the biggest thing that has helped me grow through all of this. I think that the experience of leaving is very different for multiple different people. I found it very peaceful to have free time. I have another friend who just got really anxious and tried to fill all of his time with hanging out with new friends, and got kind of burnt out by that. But it was an interesting transition initially, for sure.
And you have friends over to visit your place now. You're proud to bring them round and show them all of your space and all of your personal belongings.
Oh, I'm so proud. Like I said, it's one of my favorite things ever. Like my apartment, the way I've decorated it. It's definitely like my sanctuary and my safe haven. So, when my friends come in, they just know that my space just screams Emma. It's very me, and I love seeing them like be relaxed in it. And yeah, I don't know, after living in a communal living house coming straight from my parents' house, it's the first space I've had to myself, and I'm taking full advantage of it for sure.
So Do you have any plans to maybe write about your experiences, or to go traveling or further education, or other things that perhaps you thought were not possible for you when you had committed everything to the church?
I'm kind of still trying to figure out what my future will look like. Um, my friends always ask me if I will write something about my experiences, because I love writing. I'm a good writer. But I don't know yet. Like we've been talking about, I'm only 2 years out. I mean, 2 years feels like forever to some degree, but I think I still am learning a lot. So I definitely want to continue to use my own story to help other people, but also speaking out of my own story has been really helpful for me as well. There was so much gaslighting that went on inside of Dwell that leaving, uh I really second guessed myself of what I experienced was abuse, or like if it was actually just all my fault. And so sharing it in platforms like this, sharing my story in platforms like this has really solidified my experience and just helped me realize like what I did see, hear, feel happened. And it's not a lie, it's not false, it's not, me having some sort of agenda. It's actual history and it's actual fact. And people can argue against that, but like I'm sharing my story in a way that, kind of makes it part of history, and it's been really empowering for me.
I think that's an awesome answer. And I wonder if that's the same sort of advice that you might offer to others in similar positions, around taking time to go for walks and taking time to research and read things to understand what you've been through in order to process all of those experiences. Is there anything else you might add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I really want other people to share their stories too. I'm happy to share mine, but part of sharing mine is in the hopes that other people feel empowered or feel like they have the courage to share their own stories too. I think that it can be intimidating coming from a group that's still functioning in a pretty evangelical environment too. Like it's easy to just kind of brush our stories aside and be like, well, other people experience this, or this group is still here, so I'll get backlash from this, which I have. But I do want other people to share their stories in the understanding of just, you don't have to come from a super infamous cult to have your story be significant. I think part of me sharing these things is to communicate that anybody can be in a cult, like especially in Columbus, Ohio, like your neighbor, your friend, your coworker, like Xenos people are everywhere. And I think that that's the case like around the world, unfortunately, is like be informed, be prepared, because you could be recruited, but also like everybody's stories are very valuable. But it's not the right time for everybody either. I mean, some of the biggest lessons I've learned are like just to be patient with myself, like give myself time to grieve and heal, and to allow myself to feel my feelings and accept them. Like it's not everybody's time to tell their story, but yeah, my hope is that people do eventually.
I love that too. Really powerful messages around encouraging people to share their stories, but understanding that people should do it when they feel it's right. Maybe that's 2 years out, maybe that's never. But we should never underestimate the power of people coming forward to tell their stories. I have emails every week that people send me to tell me that other people's testimonies have been the catalyst for them to leave their own group. And I think that's wonderful. So you really can't underestimate what telling your story, either on a podcast or in a blog post or in a book or on the radio, or however you decide to do it, it could really change one life, hundreds of lives, the organization itself feeling like it has to rebrand and kick out leadership and replace them with people that are even worse. And I really love what you've talked about today in introspectively almost, about how you recognize that things are difficult. You're still having to unlearn things, and you probably will have to for a long time, and how there are things that you have to battle with and things that still trigger you. But also on the flip side of that, understand how much fuller your life is now, and how great the experiences are, and the friendship groups, and all of the living space that you have, and autonomy, and the surveillance is turned off. And I think that's wonderful. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Emma, for sharing your experiences with us, and being one of those people that won't stand by and be complicit in the abuse of others, being one of the people that says, actually, it's not good enough to just say, well, I'm not a part of that part of the church, so I'm not part of the abuse, because the cycle of abuse can only break when people step out of the repetitive practices that they're involved in. And I think it's extremely brave for you to come forward after such a short amount of time and say, that part of me that needs to speak out is ready to do that, so I'm going to start doing it. I think it's absolutely incredible. And I hope that there are hundreds of more podcasts that invite you onto the show so that you can get your story out there to as many people as possible.
Thank you.
I'm going to sign off and try, and sorry, it's been a bit shorter than usual and a bit disrupted, but it's been so wonderful to talk to you, Emma, and I really hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you as well.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
That is the end of this mini-series on Xenos Christian Fellowship. To get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com, or follow me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.